Yeah, so the Israelis just this morning withdrew from all the Lebanese villages that they occupy, but they retained five hills that they're controlling from on the border that overlook these villages and overlook the Israeli colonies on the other side. These used to be also places where the Israelis had bases during the occupation in the 1980s and 90s. We saw huge waves of civilians from Lebanon going down to their villages and looking for their homes and any loved ones that they have lost. And there was a miraculous moment where five Hezbollah fighters came out from under the rubble alive. They have been hiding and eating the whatever food they can find inside these blown up houses. So this obviously showed how much of a failure the Israeli operation was inside these villages. It also opened up a big question about the last 60 days of the ceasefire. How many other Lebanese Hezbollah fighters were still alive when the ceasefire was called and were blown up by the Israelis, or when they were destroying all these houses without even knowing that they're probably killing Hezbollah fighters? So there was a lot of anger from the civilians in these villages because they were wondering if their loved ones could have been alive today if the Israelis actually withdrew when the ceasefire was called, and or the Lebanese government and the Lebanese army and the UNIFIL, the United Nations ceasefire troops, did their job and tried to find anybody who's missing on their bodies. And so this was a big day here in Lebanon. People were worried that the Israelis were not going to withdraw from these villages, but it happened. Now, the question is, what's going to happen with these five points that the Israelis are still occupying these hills? And we saw a statement from the president, the new president, Joseph Aoun, saying that the Israelis have to withdraw from these, that this is Lebanese territory. But in that same statement, he's saying that he's just going to be talking to their international partners to get Israel out because nobody wants war. So clearly the Lebanese military and the Lebanese government are not going to do anything to liberate these territories. So we'll see if the continued pressure from the West will lead to the Israelis leaving these points. But we saw the Israelis build kind of permanent bases there with these fortified concrete prefabbed rooms that they bring in where their soldiers can stay. So I don't know how long it's going to be, but there will be at some point some clashes to get the Israelis out, and or some pressure from the West to get them out.
Laith, the situation in southern Lebanon is bringing some sort of conflict between Hezbollah and the government. And what would be the next step on the part of Hezbollah, in your opinion?
It's not clear what Hezbollah will do. I think Hezbollah is right now trying to keep the government and the Lebanese military in the forefront of this struggle in order to either force the Lebanese military and the Lebanese government to deliver on their duties to protect Lebanese territory and Lebanese civilians, and or if they don't, to have the full legitimacy to take action. If the Lebanese government and Lebanese army, even with the help of Hezbollah, are not willing to deliver on their duties, then Hezbollah has more legitimacy to reactivate its military activities. And so we're in this moment of limbo. Of course, there's all the changes that are happening in the region. What happened in Syria? There's the ceasefire in Gaza. There's the situation in the West Bank. There's the negotiations happening between Russia and the U.S. in Saudi. All of these things are weighing on the situation in Lebanon. But we already saw yesterday the Yemeni resistance, Ansarullah, and the Yemeni military fire 5 drones on Israel in kind of warnings about what's happening in the West Bank and what's happening in Gaza and what's happening in South Lebanon. So things are still open. We don't know where things are going to go. We hope for the best, but at any moment, things could reignite in the region.
We had 2 days ago, if I'm not mistaken, reported that Hamas would hand the Gaza Strip over to Palestinian Authority. That news, that sort of report, had anything to do with the reality?
I'm not sure, but obviously it was reported in Israeli media. And in that same report, it said that Netanyahu will reject the Palestinian Authority control of Gaza. So it's a moot point. Even I'm not sure that actually Hamas said these things, but if they did, it would have been really to get Netanyahu to say what he said, which means there will be no Palestinian Authority in Gaza. And as we see, because of the cowardice of the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank and its collaboration with the Israeli occupation forces against the residents of the West Bank, there is no credibility for the PA, not in Gaza, not in the West Bank, not in the diaspora, nowhere anybody likes Mahmoud Abbas and or accept their rule over any part of Palestine. In fact, today there was one of the leaders of Fatah, his name is Qaddura, his last name is one of the elders, of Fatah. He was just arrested by the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank because he was out demonstrating with the rest of the civilians about the collaboration of the Palestinian Authority. So we see right now schisms within Fatah and the Palestinian Authority itself that could lead to its collapse.
The West Bank, you mentioned the West Bank. How do you see the situation in the West Bank, and do you think that the main focus for Israel would be in that region for the time being?
Yeah, I mean, right now, the 3 major cities in the north of the West Bank, Tulkarem, Jenin, and Nablus, are under siege now for a month, and bombardment. Their refugee camps practically totally destroyed. The images that our reporters are, getting out and putting on our videos show something very similar to Gaza and to the South Lebanon, the villages there. There's 100,000 Palestinians that are now displaced from these 3 cities. And this is the largest wave of Palestinians displacement in the West Bank since the 1967 war. So it's a huge situation that the mainstream media is not covering, and nobody's talking about it because of the bigger events that are happening inside Gaza and Lebanon, and we see, of course, the Ukraine peace situation negotiations. So there's a lot of stories that are making what's happening in the West Bank invisible, and I think the Israelis are taking advantage of that. And we see them, conducting raids on other villages that are scattered around and smaller. We also see a lot of attacks by the settlers coordinated with the soldiers. There's multiple villages outside Beit Lahem that have been completely ethnically cleansed by these attacks of the settlers and the soldiers with them. So it's ongoing. I don't know how much Israel can continue on this path before things blow out in their face, because as soon as the story of what's happening in Lebanon or Gaza or what's happening right now in Saudi die out, it's going to come back to the forefront. And you look at the Palestinians in the West Bank, the resistance, they're not giving up. They're fighting back. There was an attack yesterday on another Israeli military outpost. And, if you remember, a week ago, there was a Palestinian fighter that entered an Israeli outpost, military outpost, and took it all and killed 4 Israeli soldiers and injured 12 and took on the outpost. So we see this building up of resistance in the West Bank, even outside these major cities that are being attacked in remote areas where the Israelis are spread out. It's not a small area like Gaza. It's a huge territory, the West Bank, and you cannot monitor every inch of it all the time. So it's much easier for individual acts of resistance to succeed and have an impact in the West Bank. And I think the Israelis are overstretching themselves right now because of their want to ethnically cleanse the West Bank.
Laith, do you see the way that Donald Trump was talking about Gaza and the plan to displace people from Gaza and send them to Egypt and Jordan somehow influenced the attitude on the part of at least Egypt to come up with a plan, at least to offer a plan without displacing people, we can rebuild Gaza? How is that serious on the part of the Egyptian government?
Well, we don't know really. You're right. Like when Trump says these things, a lot of times he's trying to negotiate. He throws something very high and then he tries to see how the other side responds. And the humiliation that he gave to the king of Jordan, I think, prompted the Egyptians to, number one, cancel their trip. Sisi was supposed to go to the White House and he canceled his trip. He didn't want to be humiliated like the king of Jordan. And very fast, they rushed to bring in aid and reconstruction materials and equipment. So we saw over the last 48 hours the entrance of bulldozers and cranes and so on to remove the rubble and begin the reconstruction. And I think Trump, by threatening to expel the Palestinians from Gaza, shook all of his local vassals that have not been delivering on whatever he wants them to deliver on. He wants probably the reconstruction of Gaza to come out of the bill of his local vassals. He doesn't want the United States to pay for it or his Zionist colony. And of course, if there was an expulsion of the Palestinians of Gaza into Egypt, into the Sinai Peninsula, there will be more Palestinians inside Sinai than Egyptians. And it will become a Palestinian territory, basically, and there will be chaos. So Egypt cannot afford that. Similarly with Jordan, if already something like 70% of Jordanian citizens come from Palestinian origin, from the 1948 ethnic cleansing, the Nakba, and the 1967 era. Could you imagine if another 2 million Palestinians are pushed out of the West Bank? There will be no more Jordan. So in both those two countries, a expulsion of the Palestinians into their territory will lead to the collapse of the state. And that's something that I don't think the Americans want either, because especially the Jordanian regime, has been the most docile and most collaborationist regime in the whole Arabic world, and since 1948, if not since World War I. So, clearly there's a duality in what Trump is doing. On the one hand, he is threatening something that is a war crime and that could destabilize his vassals in the region. On the other, he's trying to get all those vassals to do the work for him. So I don't know if it's going to happen, but look, the Israelis are crazy. They have lost this war. Yes, there's been tens of thousands of Palestinians massacred, a huge destruction in the West Bank and Gaza. But Israel, according to their own admittance, lost around 7,000 soldiers. This is according to their own admittance, and have something like almost 20,000 injured. Again, this is according to their admittance. I personally believe that the number is double that. And you add to it the mercenaries and the special forces of the West, that number is very huge. And remember, the United States lost only 65,000 in the Vietnam War, 65,000 soldiers. So when you're talking about a small country like Israel losing something like, let's be generous to them, just say 15,000 soldiers dead, that's a huge number for a country that's only 7 million colonists in it. And it cannot survive for long if it continues in these wars.
Laith, do you see the situation? It seems that Israelis want to stay in southern Syria, in the southern part of Syria. They're not going to leave that part of land, Golan Heights and beyond Golan Heights. Do you think that would complicate the situation that we're having right now in terms of the ceasefire, in terms of what's going on with Hezbollah, and a new front for Israel would be with Turkey and with Syria? Or the government in Syria is not that much influential and they're going to accept whatever going on, whatever is happening right now in southern part of Syria?
Well, first off, we need to know that every member of the new Syrian government cabinet is a dual citizen that has a Turkish passport. Every one of them, every minister right now has dual citizenship. So really, Turkey is the one that is governing right now Syria, except the areas that Israel and the United States occupy. The other thing that we need to note here is that, the vast majority of the population of Syria right now is suffering immensely, suffering like they haven't suffered in the whole 15 years of war and blockade in the country. Although the national currency price exchange went up, the salaries didn't, and actually the prices of everything went up in the streets. And there is a shortage of national currency. So people cannot, when they go to the bank to withdraw their money, they're not able to because the bank doesn't have, liras to give them. So people are right now starving like they haven't starved before. They are, having direct oppression in the street. People can say whatever they want to about the Ba'ath party and Assad's government, but you never saw lynchings in the streets. You never saw people being beat up because of their, sect or religion or whatever. And every day there's women being abducted, raped, and killed every day. And we're talking about students in universities, not only minorities, not only Alawis or Shia or Christian or Druze, but even Sunni. So the situation is very volatile. Already we have an armed uprising in the coast of Syria and in the Suwaida region close to the border with Iraq and Jordan. I just read an article in the Israeli media today claiming that Iran and Turkey are ganging together to start rearming Hezbollah. I don't know, of course, if this is true. The Israelis say a lot of lies. In my mind, it doesn't add up that Turkey will start rearming Hezbollah. But prior to the collapse of the Syrian government, for a long time, the axis of resistance was trying to prepare the front of the Golan Heights as what they called the crazy front. Okay, that if there was a full-out regional war, that this will be the front that everything and anything could happen on. Okay, so the Israelis are obviously trying to go as far as possible inside the south of Syria to find any underground tunnels or enforcements, or find any weapons that are hidden by the axis of resistance in there, and they're not being that successful. Okay, so at any moment, I think the HTS government is not going to last. I personally don't think it's going to last. And once that happens, once there's chaos in Syria, the Golan front will be reopened, and this time there will be no central state like the Assad government that could, slow down any possibility of war from that front. And if that front opens, it's going to be the easiest, I think, to harm Israel, because Syria is already destroyed. There's no government. There's, let's say here, Lebanon, if it reopens, there's the pressures from the government, there's pressures from other sects and so forth, and the pressures from outside. Syria is a total chaos, so nobody can control it if the war front opens. And so it gives us hope, actually, that, out of the ashes of Syria being controlled by these Wahhabi death squads, that actually some resistance will be born there.
Laith, do you understand those people who are still supporting HTS in the Arab world, in the people who are supporting Palestine, by the way? We have to consider that. But at the same time, they don't support, they're supporting the HTS and the new government in Syria.
Look, I think we shouldn't take what we see on the social media as a real parameter of what the population in the Arabic world believes, or the Muslim world, because there's a lot of these bots and Unit 8200 of Israel that pretend to be Arabs and Muslims and create these schisms. A month ago, inside Syria, I would say a lot of people were happy that HTS came into power. But today, I can guarantee you that at least 70% of the population wants them out, and that they are crying for the days of Assad to come back. And this includes the majority of the Sunni population. Why? Because the Sunni population in Syria is not a Wahhabi followers. They're not Muslim Brotherhood either. They're Sufis, meaning mystics. We saw today the former Mufti of Syria, Hassoun, his home being raided by HTS thugs in Aleppo city. This is a man that's beloved in Syria, and his son was assassinated in cold blood years ago during the war, as he was coming out of the university. And at the time, Mufti Hassoun made a public statement forgiving those who killed his son. And even when they were captured by the Syrian government, he went to the jail and sat with them and forgave them, and asked the Syrian government to reconcile with them and let them go. And so to see how these very gentle souls in the Muslim Sunni sect are being humiliated, attacked, killed, assassinated, this is not boding well with the Sunni population, who are very moderate in Syria. This is not Saudi Arabia. This is not the UAE or Qatar. This is the heart of Muslim moderation. Syria has always been known as that, the heart of coexistence. I mean, there's no country that's more diverse in sects and religions in the region than Syria. And it's because, and this is historic, this is for centuries like this. So HTS does not fit in Syria correctly. And the way they are acting by humiliating the big names in the Muslim Sunni population, and or the way that they are treating the minorities in such rude and criminal way, this is going to flip in their face, and we're seeing already the beginnings of that.
Do you see the support coming to the plan of Egyptian plan for Gaza from Saudi Arabia and UAE?
I think at least from Saudi Arabia. UAE is a sellout, total sellout. It's not even a country. It's a gas station with 9 million non-citizens in it. And it's the most Zionist of every Arabic countries, the leadership there. But Saudi Arabia definitely is going to put in money to rebuilding Gaza, because they are worried about Trump throwing their name into the possibility of territories to expel the Palestinians to. So Saudi Arabia is also, still hosts the two holiest sites in Islam, Mecca and Medina. And even though that MBS is trying to, remold Saudi Arabia into this liberal place, the biggest currency they have in terms of influence in the Arabic and Muslim world is the religious holy sites, and being the protectors of those religious holy sites. So they have a limitation to how much collaboration they can do. And therefore, we heard those and read those public statements by the crown in the Saudi, saying that they refuse normalization until there's a Palestinian state on the 1967 borders, and that they refuse the expulsion or removal of the Palestinians from their lands. Those, maybe they are just words, but clearly they do not want the expulsion of the Palestinians, because it's going to affect them. It's going to affect them very badly, and it's going to only strengthen the axis of resistance that is right now in one of its weakest moments. So sometimes Trump, with what he's doing, and Netanyahu with what he's doing, is actually harming his allies and re-strengthening the axis of resistance. And that only is happening because of the arrogance, the supremacy in the mind of Netanyahu and the Zionists in general, that doesn't allow them sometimes to calculate correctly their speech.
Laith, if somehow Netanyahu was removed from power in Israel, do you see that the just removal of Netanyahu would bring any sort of change in the attitude of Israel?
I don't think so. Look, it's been 100 years, and from day one, the Zionist plan was to expel the Palestinians and or to genocide them. There's no way you can have a settler colony in a land that is full of indigenous people and rule over that territory without either expelling the indigenous and or killing them to a point where they're an insignificant minority. So the various Israeli governments from 1948 till now, and even before the creation of Israel, the Haganah and the other Zionist death squads, they all followed that plan. So some of those Israeli leaders thought, let's do it incrementally, and some others, as happened with Netanyahu, are thinking, let's do it all at once and get rid of this, headache. Okay, so, but also I would just want to say that, it's been 100 years and the Israelis haven't succeeded in either totally genociding the Palestinians or totally expelling the Palestinians from Palestine. And in the moments that they managed to expel big numbers of Palestinians, that backfired on them and backfired on all the states that are around the Zionist colony. So we saw, of course, the uprising in Jordan in the 1970s. We saw the Palestinians fighting from inside Egypt in Sinai during Abdel Nasser's time. We saw what happened in Lebanon. We saw what happened in Syria. So the presence of Palestinians outside Palestine actually makes that easier for the Palestinians to fight. You see, inside Gaza, you're stuck. Maybe inside Sinai, it's going to be much easier to smuggle weapons with all the sea, water, open, and desert and everything, and to launch constant attacks. So this is why I think it's untenable. The remaining of this colony is untenable. It has to collapse. It has to end Israel. And the existence of the Zionist colony right now, as we saw over the last 16 months, harmed the whole West and the projection of power by the West, and burnt all the soft power that the West had accumulated over 100 years in a span of months. Now nobody believes in anything about democracy, human rights, international law. If you say those things to a child in Africa, they'll laugh in your face right now. And that's all because of what Israel did. So the continuation of this colony is a huge burden on not only the Zionists themselves, but on all of the West. And I think, if we continue on this path for another few years, there will be neither a Zionist colony or American hegemony in the region.
Iran and Hezbollah right now. We know that the government in Lebanon has decided not to let Iranian civilian airplanes to land in Lebanon. What's the main reason of these sort of tensions between Iran and the government in Lebanon?
Well, the Israeli government threatened to bomb the international airport in Beirut if Iranian civilian flights continue to land. And the new prime minister of Lebanon, Salam, who was the chief justice in the International Court of Justice on the genocide file, and he's a very articulate man, and lawyers have to be, orators and so forth. He has lost his mind and buckled under the pressure of the Israelis and decided to ban Iranian flights from landing in Beirut. And he gave a speech in front of the television where he couldn't finish one sentence correctly, was tumbling over his words, and made up this, lie that the reason that they're banning the Iranian flights from landing is because the Iranian aircraft companies are under sanctions from the West, when clearly the Iranian airlines are landing in the Emirates, they're landing in Qatar, they're landing in Turkey, they're landing in France, they're landing in Germany. So it's just a made-up excuse because he wanted to hide his cowardice and his impetus. And this is a lawyer of international law, right? Lying in front of the cameras about the implications of supposed sanctions against Iranian airliners. So, that is why there was immediately a spontaneous reaction from the Lebanese population of 2 days of demonstrations outside the airport. And it started getting out of hand because this was really spontaneous. There was no backing from any party for these demonstrations. And eventually that Hezbollah had to come in and try to control the situation by calling their own demonstration and organizing it with the government. And this is where it got really bad, actually. 2 days ago, during this demonstration that was sanctioned by the government and Hezbollah had control of this demonstration, the Lebanese military fired tear gas on the stage as the Hezbollah representative was speaking. And then it went into chaos. And so I think the Lebanese government, the new president, the new prime minister, keep on shooting themselves in the foot. They're fresh off, into their position, and they keep on making mistakes over and over. And the only reason they're making these mistakes is because they are thinking too much of the pressures by the American embassy or the Israeli government, when they should actually be a little bit more bold in this moment. Look at the boldness of Hamas in Gaza under pressure from Trump. They didn't buckle, and still they're safe. There was no return to war, or hell broke loose as Trump was threatening. So the weakness of the Lebanese government is really what's giving Israel more points here.
What do we know, just before wrapping up, Laith, what do we know about the funeral of Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah? What can you tell us about that?
So the funeral is scheduled for Sunday. The procession will start from the Olympic Stadium in Beirut, and they will walk on the main highway to the airport. And then there's a plot of land that Hezbollah bought, and they're building a shrine where he will be buried. The next day, the other Secretary General of Hezbollah, Safiyuddin, who died also just like a week after, he was also assassinated a week after Nasrallah, will also be buried, but in his town in the south of Lebanon. We are expecting dignitaries from all around the world, many big names of revolutionaries and activists from even Western countries, media personalities, but also, government representatives from Iran, Iraq, Yemen, and other countries that are going to come. It's expected there will be like 400, 500, maybe over 500,000 people out in the street on the day for this procession. I personally think that's even going to be more, but the smallest predictions is something like 500,000 people out in the street. All the hotels are booked completely in Beirut, so that shows you how many foreign visitors are coming for this event, and it will be remembered, I think, as the biggest funeral in Lebanon's history.